The observation, the universe was old beyond measure, and those who ruled it were older still. Deep in the heart of the galaxy, far from the young stars where new life struggled to survive, there existed a council of ancient beings. They called themselves the Galactic Concord, and they had watched over the stars for longer than most species had existed. Their ships were vast and silent. Their technology could reshape planets and move suns. They had seen 1,000 civilizations rise and fall, and they believed they understood how the universe worked. The Sindari were the eldest among them. Their bodies were like living crystal, and their minds could hold memories stretching back millions of years. Ambassador Velthrix had served the Concord for 10,000 years, and in that time, he had seen many young species reach for the stars. Most of them died. A few survived long enough to join the Concord as junior members. None of them ever became truly important. That was the natural order of things. And Velthrix saw no reason why the small blue planet called Earth would be any different. The Watchers, as the younger species called them, had been observing Earth for a very long time. They had watched humans crawl out of caves and build fires. They had watched them forge metal and sail across oceans. They had watched them split the atom and reach their own moon. Through it all, the Concord had done nothing. They simply watched and waited. The rules were clear and ancient. Young species must prove themselves worthy before they could receive help. They must show that they could survive the darkness between stars without assistance. They must demonstrate strength, wisdom, and the ability to endure. Those who could not meet these standards were left to die. Those who could were welcomed into the greater community of intelligent life. It was harsh, but the Concord believed it was necessary. The galaxy was a dangerous place, full of predators and disasters that could destroy any species too weak to defend itself. Better to let the weak die early than to prop them up only to watch them fall later. When humanity's first interstellar probe crossed the boundary line in the year 2347, alarms rang through every Concord station in that sector of space. The probe was small and crude, powered by technology that the Concord had abandoned millions of years ago. But it worked. Against all odds, humans had reached beyond their own solar system. Velthrix called an emergency meeting of the full council. Representatives from 47 elder species gathered in the grand chamber. A rune carved from the heart of a hollow moon. Light from a captive star filtered through crystal walls, casting rainbow shadows across the assembled delegates. The air hummed with translation fields that turned 1,000 different languages into one. "The humans have crossed the line," Velthrix announced. His crystal body pulsed with soft blue light as he spoke. "We must decide their fate." The debate lasted for 3 standard days, though the outcome was never really in doubt. The Marathi delegate spoke first. Her species resembled great floating jellyfish, and her voice came as a series of musical tones. "We have studied these humans," she said. "They are violent and unpredictable. They make war upon each other constantly. Their history is written in blood. They are also clever," noted the representative of the Cathari. His people were hunters, with scales and claws and cold eyes. Perhaps too clever. They learn quickly. They adapt. They could become dangerous. "All the more reason to deny them assistance," Velthrix replied. "Let them prove themselves in the old way. If they are truly worthy, they will survive. If not, the galaxy will be spared another failed species." One by one, the other delegates voiced their agreement. The humans were too young, too wild, too unpredictable. They had not earned the right to join the greater community. They would receive no help, no guidance, no protection. They would face the darkness alone. The final vote was unanimous. Velthrix himself carved the decree into the quantum archives, where it would remain for all eternity. The words were simple and cold. Endure lacking help. From that moment forward, humanity was alone in the universe. Their distress signals would go unanswered. Their calls for trade would be ignored. When they discovered other intelligent life, those species would be instructed to have no contact with them. Earth's children would have to make their own way among the stars, without maps or friends or any knowledge of the dangers that awaited them. The Concord believed this was a death sentence. Space was vast and cruel, and young species died there all the time. Without help, humans would stumble into disasters they could not understand. They would be prey for raiders and pirates. They would colonize worlds that would kill them slowly. In 100 years, perhaps 200, they would be gone. Just another failed experiment in the long history of the galaxy. The Watchers settled back to observe the slow extinction of another promising species, but they had made a mistake. In all their millions of years of watching and judging, the Concord had never encountered anything quite like humanity. They had seen violent species before, but humans were different. They had seen clever species, but humans were different. They had seen species that refused to die, but humans were different. The difference was small at first. A colony on Proxima 4 sent a distress signal when raiders attacked. The Watchers recorded it and did nothing, as their laws required. They expected to document another massacre, another failure, another step toward extinction. Instead, they watched something that made the eldest among them feel an emotion they had almost forgotten. Fear. The humans on Proxima 4 did not run. They did not surrender. They did not die quietly like so many species before them. Instead, they fought. They fought with weapons made from mining tools and farming equipment. They fought in caves and tunnels that they had dug with their own hands. They fought until the raiders, who had expected easy prey, retreated in confusion and terror. Velthrix studied the recordings for a long time. He had seen countless young species face their first crisis. Most of them panicked. Most of them fell apart. The humans had done something else entirely. They had looked at their impossible situation, and they had refused to accept it. The Crystal Ambassador filed his report and marked it classified. He told no one of the strange feeling growing in his ancient mind. For the first time in 10,000 years, Velthrix was worried about the future. The first proving the colony on Proxima IV was never supposed to survive. When the first settlers landed on that rocky, windswept world, they knew they were taking a terrible risk. The planet was barely livable. The air was thin and cold. The soil was poor. Storms swept across the surface for weeks at a time, bringing freezing rain and lightning that could kill a person where they stood. But Earth was crowded and desperate, and the colonists had nowhere else to go. They built their homes into the sides of cliffs to protect against the wind. They dug tunnels through the rock to connect their buildings. They worked every day from dawn until dark, trying to grow food in greenhouses and mine minerals from the mountains. Life was hard, but they made it work. 73 men, women, and children, carving out a tiny piece of civilization on a world that did not want them. Mira-chan was one of the original settlers. She had been a geological surveyor back on Earth, mapping caves and underground rivers. On Proxima 4, her skills were valuable. She spent months exploring the tunnel systems that ran beneath the colony, mapping every passage and chamber. She knew those caves better than anyone alive. Dmitry Volkov was younger, barely 20 years old when the colony ship landed. He worked in the mines, setting charges to break apart rock faces and extract the metals that kept the colony running. He was good with explosives, better than anyone else on the planet. The other miners said he had a gift for knowing exactly how much force was needed to bring down a wall of stone. Dr. Amara Okonkwo was the colony's only real scientist. She had studied biology and medicine on Earth, and she spent her time on Proxima 4 learning about the planet's strange ecosystem. The most interesting thing she found was a type of spore that grew in the lowlands. The spore was toxic to humans, causing fever and paralysis. But Amara discovered that tiny doses could build up immunity over time. She had been exposing herself to the spores for months, building her resistance, hoping to find some medical use for her discovery. None of them knew that their lives were about to change forever. The Cathari raiders arrived without warning on a cold morning in late autumn. Their ships came down from the sky like falling stars, and their warriors poured out onto the rocky ground with weapons drawn. The Cathari were hunters by nature, a species of scaled predators who had turned to piracy after their own world became too small for them. They raided young colonies for supplies, slaves, and sport. The Galactic Concord knew about them but did nothing. The Watchers simply observed. The Cathari expected the attack to be easy. 73 civilians against 200 trained warriors. The math was simple. They would kill anyone who resisted, take whatever they wanted, and leave before anyone could respond. It was how they had operated for generations. But no one had told the humans they were supposed to lose. When the first shots were fired, Narration was working in the tunnels beneath the colony. She heard the explosions above and understood immediately what was happening. Instead of running to the surface to fight, she ran deeper into the caves, shouting for everyone she passed to follow her. Within an hour, the surviving colonists had gathered in a large chamber deep underground. 38 people had made it. The rest were dead or captured. The Cathari controlled the surface, and there was no way to call for help. The colony's communication equipment had been destroyed in the first minutes of the attack. Most people would have given up. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped underground with limited food and water. The logical thing to do was surrender and hope for mercy. Myra Chun had a different idea. "We know these tunnels," she told the survivors. "They don't. We can use that." Dmitry Volkov nodded slowly. He was already thinking about the mining charges stored in the lower levels. There were enough explosives down there to bring down half a mountain. Used carefully, they could turn the tunnels into death traps. Dr. Okonkwo thought about the spore fields in the lowlands. The Cathari would have to cross those fields to reach the tunnel entrances. If she could find a way to concentrate the spores, to make them more potent, she could turn the planet itself into a weapon. They worked through the night, preparing for a fight that should have been impossible to win. The Cathari hunters entered the tunnels the next morning, confident and arrogant. They had thermal sensors and advanced weapons. They expected to find frightened civilians hiding in the dark. Instead, they found hell. The first group walked into a narrow passage rigged with mining charges. Dmitry detonated them from a safe distance, bringing down the ceiling and burying 15 warriors under tons of rock. The second group tried a different route and ran straight into a cloud of concentrated spores that Amara had released from a broken container. Within minutes, they were on the ground, choking and paralyzed. The survivors fought in the darkness, using their knowledge of the caves to appear and disappear like ghosts. They set traps and ambushes. They collapsed tunnels behind them and opened new passages ahead. They turned every advantage the Cathari thought they had into a weakness. For 3 days, the battle raged beneath the surface of Proxima 4. The Cathari, who had never faced real resistance from a colony world, began to panic. They were losing warriors faster than they could count. The darkness was full of enemies they could not see. The air itself seemed to poison them. On the 4th day, the raiders retreated to their ships and fled into space. They left behind the bodies of 93 warriors, nearly half their force. They had come expecting easy prey and found something else entirely. Above the planet, hidden observation drones recorded everything and transmitted it to the Watchers. Velthrix watched the footage in silence, his crystal body flickering with colors that had no name. He had seen young species fight before. He had never seen them fight like this. The humans had not just survived. They had adapted. In 72 hours, they had transformed from helpless victims into deadly predators. They had taken a hostile environment and made it into a weapon. They had shown a capacity for violence and creativity that the Cathari had never imagined. The Concord had expected humanity to die quietly in the darkness between stars. Instead, they were learning to thrive in it. Velthrix added a note to his report. Continued observation recommended. Potential threat level unknown. Far below, on the surface of Proxima 4, the surviving colonists emerged from their tunnels and began to rebuild. They buried their dead and tended their wounded. They repaired what could be repaired and replaced what could not. And they remembered the lesson they had learned in those dark caves. They could rely on no one but themselves. And that was enough. The spreading 50 years passed, and humanity refused to die. The Watchers had expected isolation to break them. Without star charts, humans would wander blindly through dangerous space. Without trade, their colonies would starve. Without allies, they would be easy prey for any predator that found them. The Galactic Concord had seen this pattern play out 100 times before. Young species that were denied help simply faded away, their colonies dying one by one until nothing remained but empty buildings and forgotten names. Humanity did not follow the pattern. Instead of dying, they spread. Instead of weakening, they grew stronger. Every world they colonized, no matter how hostile, became a new home. Every disaster they faced taught them new lessons. Every enemy they fought made them more dangerous. By the year 2397, humans had established permanent settlements on 12 different worlds. None of them were paradise planets. None of them were easy places to live. The Concord controlled all the good worlds, the ones with gentle climates and rich soil and clean water. Humanity got the leftovers, the death worlds that no sensible species would touch. They made them work anyway. Pyrrhus 7 was a world of acid and fire. The rain that fell from its yellow clouds could burn through metal in minutes. The ground was covered in pools of chemicals that could dissolve flesh and bone. No member of the Galactic Concord had ever considered colonizing it. The environmental suits alone would cost more than most species could afford, and even then, one small tear meant death. The humans who landed on Pyrrhus 7 looked at the acid rain and the poisoned ground and saw a challenge. They could not live on the surface, so they built floating cities instead. They harvested gases from the atmosphere and filled enormous balloons that lifted their buildings above the deadly clouds. They developed new materials that could resist the acid. They turned the planet's chemistry into fuel and medicine and building supplies. Within 20 years, Pyrrhus 7 had a population of 2 million people, all of them living in cities that floated through toxic skies like islands in an orange sea. Jotunheim was the opposite problem. It was a frozen moon orbiting a gas giant, so cold that unprotected humans would die in seconds. The surface was covered in glaciers hundreds of meters thick, and temperatures dropped so low that even the air could freeze solid. The Concord had classified it as permanently uninhabitable. The humans who settled Jotunheim carved their cities directly into the ice. They dug tunnels and chambers, using the glaciers themselves as building material. Deep beneath the frozen surface, they found geothermal vents that provided heat and energy. They built farms in heated caverns and factories powered by the planet's inner fire. They learned to live in a world of eternal winter, wrapped in ice, but never cold. The other colonies followed similar patterns. Harsh worlds, impossible conditions, stubborn humans who refused to accept that they could not survive. Each colony developed its own specialties, its own technologies, its own ways of turning death into life. They shared their knowledge through the slow communication networks that connected human space, building a library of survival techniques that grew larger every year. The Watchers observed all of this with growing concern. Ambassador Velfrix called another meeting of the Concord, his crystal body flashing with agitated colors. "The humans are not dying," he reported. "They are adapting faster than any species we have ever observed. Every hostile environment we thought would kill them has made them stronger instead." The other delegates shifted uncomfortably. The Marathi representative spoke first, her musical voice troubled. "Perhaps we underestimated them. Perhaps we should reconsider our decision." "It is too late for that," Velfrix replied. "If we offer help now, after 50 years of isolation, they will know we were watching all along. They will know we chose to let them suffer. The consequences of that revelation could be severe." The Cathari delegate hissed in anger. His people had lost many ships and warriors to human defenders over the years. The easy raids they had once enjoyed were now suicide missions. "We should destroy them while we still can," he suggested. "Redirect an asteroid. Release a plague. End this threat before it grows too large to control." A long silence followed his words. The Concord's laws were clear. They could deny help to young species, but they could not directly harm them. It was the one rule that had never been broken in millions of years. "We cannot do that," Velfrix finally said. "The laws exist for good reason. If we begin destroying species we find inconvenient, we become no better than the predators we claim to oppose." "Then what do we do?" the Marathi asked. Velfrix's body pulsed with a color that might have been resignation. "We wait," he said. "The universe is full of dangers that we did not create. Eventually, the humans will encounter one they cannot overcome. The Void Swarm, perhaps. Nothing survives the Void Swarm." The other delegates murmured agreement. The Void Swarm was the greatest terror in the galaxy, a cloud of living machines that consumed everything in their path. They had destroyed 18 civilizations over the millennia, species that were far older and more advanced than humanity. Surely, when the swarm finally found Earth's colonies, that would be the end. The Concord returned to watching and waiting, confident that the universe would solve their problem for them. They did not understand what they had created. Every hostile world humanity colonized was a training ground. Every disaster they survived taught them how to survive worse. Every enemy they faced made them more prepared for the next one. The Concord had wanted to break humanity with neglect. Instead, they had tempered them like steel in a forge. On 12 worlds scattered across human space, billions of people lived in conditions that would kill most species in hours. They had learned to fight storms that could level cities. They had learned to breathe air that would poison anyone else. They had learned the universe was hostile and uncaring, and that the only way to survive was to be tougher than everything that wanted to kill them. They did not know about the Void Swarm yet. But when it came, they would be ready. The Watchers thought they were observing a dying species. They were actually watching the birth of something the galaxy had never seen before. The swarm, the Void Swarm, had no beginning that anyone could remember. It simply existed as old as the stars themselves, a plague of living machines that wandered through the galaxy, consuming everything they touched. No one knew who had created them or why. Some believed they were weapons from an ancient war, machines that had outlived their masters and continued their mission of destruction forever. Others thought they were a natural phenomenon, a form of life that evolved to feed on civilizations the way a fire feeds on wood. The truth was lost in the depths of time, and it did not matter anyway. What mattered was what the swarm did. They came in clouds so thick they blocked out the light of stars. Billions of mechanical creatures, each one small enough to fit in a human hand, but together forming a force that could strip a planet bare in days. They consumed metal and flesh with equal hunger. They tore apart cities and ships and people. They left nothing behind but empty rock and silence. 18 civilizations had fallen to the void swarm over the millennia. Species that had built empires spanning hundreds of worlds were reduced to dust and memory. The Galactic Concord itself had fought the swarm once, long ago, and barely survived. Now, they simply tracked its movements and warned their members to evacuate. When it came near Dot in the year 2412, the swarm changed direction. It turned toward a small cluster of worlds on the edge of explored space. Worlds that belonged to humanity. Ambassador Velthrix received the report and felt something he had not felt in thousands of years: relief. Finally, the universe was going to solve the human problem. The swarm would do what the Concord's laws would not allow them to do themselves. It was tragic, of course, but also necessary. Some species simply were not meant to survive. The Watchers positioned their observation drones around human space and prepared to document the extinction of another promising young species. What they documented instead would change the galaxy forever. Admiral Yuki Tanaka had known the swarm was coming for almost a year. Human scout ships had spotted the distant cloud and recognized it from old Concord broadcasts they had intercepted decades ago. They knew what it was. They knew what it had done to other species. They knew that no one was coming to help them. For the first time in human history, all 12 colony worlds worked together on a single project. They called it the Gehenna Protocol, named after an ancient word for a place of fire and suffering. It was the most ambitious military operation humanity had ever attempted, and it relied on a simple truth that the Watchers had never understood. Humanity had spent 65 years living on death worlds. They knew how to survive in hostile environments. More importantly, they knew how to make hostile environments even more hostile. The swarm arrived at the outer edge of human space on a cold morning in March. Billions of mechanical creatures poured across the void, their sensors seeking the heat and metal of living worlds. They found Pyrrha 7 first. The acid world with its floating cities thought the Watchers expected to see destroyed in hours. Instead, they saw something unprecedented. The floating cities of Pyrrha 7 rose higher into the atmosphere, climbing above the acid clouds into the thin upper air. Below them, the human defenders opened thousands of valves and pumps that had been installed over the past year. Concentrated acid, far more potent than anything that fell naturally from the sky, poured down onto the swarm. The mechanical creatures were tough, designed to survive almost anything, but they were not designed for this. Their metal bodies dissolved. Their circuits melted. Billions of them fell into the acid pools below, where they were consumed completely. On Jotunheim, the frozen moon, the humans waited until the swarm entered the tunnel systems they had carved into the glaciers. Then they collapsed the tunnels, burying the machines under millions of tons of ice. They flooded the lower levels with water that froze solid in seconds, trapping the swarm in tombs of eternal cold. On a dozen other worlds, similar traps were sprung. Every deadly environment that humanity had learned to survive became a weapon against the invaders. Fire worlds roasted the swarm. Poison worlds choked them. Radiation worlds fried their circuits. Crushing gravity worlds smashed them flat. The battle lasted for 6 months. 6 months of constant fighting across 12 worlds, with every man, woman, and child in human space contributing to the defense. They lost cities. They lost millions of lives. They paid a price in blood and tears that would scar humanity for generations. But they won when the last of the swarm finally retreated. Pulling back into the void between stars, they left behind the shattered remains of more than half their number. For the first time in recorded history, the void swarm had been defeated. Not just stopped, but broken. Sent running like wounded animals fleeing from a predator. They had not expected to find the observation drones transmitted their recordings back to the Concorde in complete silence. For a long time, no one spoke. No one knew what to say. Ambassador Velthrix studied the data with something approaching horror. The humans had not just survived. They had won. They had taken the greatest terror in the galaxy and made it afraid. "This is impossible," the Marathi delegate whispered. "No species has ever done this. Not even us." Velthrix's crystal body flickered with colors that had no name. "The humans did not fight like a young species," he said slowly. "They fought like a species that has been at war with the universe for their entire existence. Every challenge we thought would break them only made them stronger. Every death world we left them to suffer on became training for this moment." The Githari delegate made a sound that might have been a bitter laugh. "We created this," he said. "We made them into what they are. If we had helped them, if we had given them easy worlds and peaceful neighbors, they would be like every other species, soft, weak, dependent on us. Instead, we forced them to become something else entirely." A long silence fell over the council chamber. "What do we do now?" someone finally asked. Velthrix had no answer. For the first time in 10,000 years, he did not know what the future held far away. On 12 battered but unbroken worlds, humanity began to rebuild once again. They buried their dead and healed their wounded. They repaired their cities and their ships. And they looked up at the stars with new eyes. They have faced the greatest threat in the galaxy and survived. They had proven that they could stand against anything the universe threw at them. Now it was time to find out what else was out there. And the Watchers watched, no longer with contempt or pity, but with something very close to fear. The reckoning, the invitation, arrived 1 year after the defeat of the Void Swarm. It came through channels that humanity did not know existed, transmitted on frequencies they had never been able to detect before. The message was simple. The Galactic Concord wished to meet with representatives of the human species. A location was provided, along with coordinates and instructions for safe passage. After 66 years of silence, the Watchers finally wanted to talk. Admiral Yuki Tanaka read the message in her office on Proxima 4, the same world where humanity had won its first victory against the Kethari raiders so many decades ago. She was old now, her hair white and her face lined with the marks of a life spent fighting impossible odds. She had led the defense against the Void Swarm. She had watched millions of her people die to protect their worlds. She was not in a forgiving mood. The human delegation that traveled to Concord Station Prime was small but carefully chosen. Ambassador Elena Reyes led the group. She was young, barely 30, but she had grown up on Proxima 4 hearing stories of the first battle. Her grandmother had been one of the original survivors, one of the 38 people who had fought back against the Kethari in the caves beneath the colony. Elena had her grandmother's eyes, dark and fierce and utterly without fear. Concord Station Prime was built into the heart of a hollow moon, just as the story said. The human ship approached slowly, surrounded by Concord vessels that could have destroyed it in seconds. Elena watched through the viewport as they passed through massive doors and entered a chamber, large enough to hold a city. The Grand Chamber was filled with representatives of 47 elder species. Some were beautiful, like the Marathi with their flowing forms and musical voices. Some were terrifying, like the Kethari with their scales and claws. Some were so strange that human eyes could barely understand what they were seeing. All of them had gathered to meet the species they had tried to kill through neglect. Ambassador Velthrix stood at the center of the chamber, his crystal body glowing with soft light. He had watched humanity for 66 years. He had seen them struggle and suffer and die. He had expected them to break. He had been wrong. "Welcome to Concord Station Prime," Velthrix said, his voice translated into perfect English by the chamber systems. "We have waited a long time for this meeting." Elena Reyes walked forward until she stood directly in front of the Crystal Ambassador. She was small compared to most of the beings in the room, but she did not look small. She looked like what she was, the representative of a species that had survived everything the universe had thrown at them. "You watched us," she said. Her voice was calm, almost pleasant, but there was something beneath it that made the nearest delegates step back. "When the Cathari came to Proxima 4 and killed our people, you watched. When our colonies starved because you denied us star charts to find good worlds, you watched. When our children died of diseases that your medicine could have cured, you watched." Velthrix's crystal body flickered with colors that might have been discomfort. "It was our way," he said. "Young species must prove themselves worthy before they can receive help. This is how it has always been done." "I know," Elena replied. "We intercepted your communications decades ago. We know about your laws. We know about your tests. We know that you expected us to die, and that you were perfectly happy to let it happen." A murmur ran through the chamber. The elder species had not known that humanity had been listening to them. They had assumed their communications were secure. Elena smiled, and it was not a warm smile. "You spent 66 years watching us struggle. Did you learn anything interesting?" Velthrix was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "We learned that we were wrong about you. We thought isolation would break you. Instead, it made you strong in ways we did not expect." "Yes," Elena said. "It did. Every hostile world you left us to colonize taught us how to survive in hostile worlds. Every enemy you refused to protect us from taught us how to fight. Every disaster you watched without helping taught us that we could rely on no one but ourselves." She paused. "You wanted to test us. Congratulations, we passed." The Cathari delegate made an angry sound. "You speak as if you are our equals," he hissed. "You are still a young species. You still know nothing of the true dangers of the galaxy." Elena turned to face him. "The Void Swarm destroyed 18 civilizations," she said calmly. "Species that were older and more advanced than us. Species that had millions of years to prepare. We defeated the swarm in 6 months, on worlds you thought were uninhabitable, using technologies we invented ourselves." She tilted her head. "How many civilizations has your species defeated?" The Cathari said nothing. Elena turned back to Velthrix. "We know why you invited us here. The Void Swarm is rebuilding. In 50 years, maybe 100, they will return. When they do, they will not come for us first. They will remember what we did to them. They will come for your paradise worlds instead, the easy targets. The places where species have grown soft and comfortable under your protection." Velthrix's crystal body pulsed with pale light. "Fear. What do you want?" he asked. Elena was quiet for a moment, looking around the chamber at the 47 species who had condemned humanity to death through indifference. Her grandmother had died in those caves on Proxima 4, fighting to protect people she loved. Millions more had died on colony worlds across human space, victims of the Concord's cold judgment. She could have demanded revenge. She could have threatened war. She could have turned her back on these ancient beings and let them face the swarm alone, just as they had once left humanity to face the darkness alone. Instead, she thought about what it meant to be human. "We want you to remember this moment," she said. "Remember that you tried to kill us with neglect, and we survived. Remember that every hardship you placed in our path only made us stronger. Remember that we passed your test so completely that now you need us more than we need you." She stepped closer to Velthrix, close enough to see her own reflection in his crystal surface. "We could leave you to face the swarm alone. That would be fair. That would be justice. But we are not going to do that. When the swarm comes for your worlds, when your people send distress signals into the void, we will answer. We will fight beside you, even though you never fought beside us. Why? The Marathi delegate asked, her musical voice filled with confusion. Why would you help us after everything we did to you? Elena turned to look at her. Because that is what humans do, she said simply. We take care of each other. We protect the weak. We fight for people who cannot fight for themselves. You tried to teach us that the universe is cruel and that survival is all that matters. You were wrong. Survival means nothing if you lose who you are in the process. She turned and walked back toward her delegation. At the door to the chamber, she paused and looked over her shoulder. We will be there when you need us, she said. Try to be worthy of it. The human delegation left the chamber in silence. Behind them, 47 elder species sat in stunned disbelief, trying to understand what had just happened. They had expected anger. They had expected demands. They had expected threats. They had not expected mercy. Ambassador Velthrix remained in the center of the chamber long after the others had left. His crystal body flickered with colors that had no name, emotions that he had not felt in 10,000 years. He had watched humanity struggle and suffer and die. He had expected them to become monsters, shaped by the cruelty they had endured. Instead, they had become something else. Something better. Something the galaxy had never seen before. The Watchers had tried to break humanity. They had failed, and now humanity was going to save them anyway. Far across the stars, on 12 battered worlds that had become homes, billions of humans looked up at the night sky. They knew what was coming. They knew the challenges that lay ahead. But they also knew something else, something that the Concord had never understood. They were never really alone. They had each other. And that was enough. It had always been enough.